After I learned this fact, the weight of strings started creating a way deeper dent on my mental memory model than it used to a year ago when I first learned Python. I was surprised that every time I've ever declared a string, an array of little characters was being assembled in the memory. In Python, it is pretty easy to create strings, but I keep forgetting that Python is basically written in C, and that is what you are here for. Let's see how we can do the same thing in C. The line "car my string 40" deserves 40 bytes of memory. In C, when you declare an array, the total memory allocated is calculated by multiplying the size of the data type, that is character in this case, by the number of elements, 40 in this case. For character, which typically uses 1 byte of memory, the total reserved memory would be 40 bytes. After that, we are going to go one by one through the 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 40 spaces, each reserved for a character of a single byte, and copy these characters 1, 2, 3, 4 in them. Although constructing a string that way might not be the most common approach, the end result does yield a string in C, a sequence of characters ending with a null character, which is declared by this. It's crucial to note the distinction between null and null. I'm going to call it null and null. Null refers to the 0 character represented by the escape sequence and 0, occupying 1 byte of memory. On the other hand, null is a macro used to initialize null pointers in C. Since writing the code earlier would take a lot of time, C allows 2 other methods to achieve the same outcome. If you want more videos like this in order, with notes and presentations with them, join my email list. That's the only solution I can give to you right now. One option is to write this, but even this is too much work. So C allows us to write this. This alternative initializes the character array myString with specific characters ending with a null character when double quotes are employed rather than single quotes, as demonstrated in the earlier instances. The null character is automatically added at the string's conclusion. When you start doing this, you realize how abstracted away most things are even in C, which in 2023 it is itself the lowest level language most programmers agree to use. At the time when C was created, it was a very high level language than what people were used to. Remember, a string is essentially an array of characters, with the final character always being the null character or the escape